some pressure on him in the second half, he started having problems. But I got to be honest, some of those passes, I don't think you could have defended those any better than they did. He burned. He went at Shed twice, and actually he went at Shed when it looked like he had his hurt ankle, and that first one, Shed had his hand on the ball in the guy's face. There's nothing you can do about that. The second one he was open, but some of those passes, that's just great spots by the receiver, and the defense, you can't play any better than that. So, that stuff's going to happen. But, yeah, I was a little concerned when I saw that many yards being given up by Jimmy Clausen. That was quite a bit. I want to say, Keelan asked, when Russell Wilson wasn't playing so well, you see all kinds of people blaming his girlfriend for all that. I wonder if they're blaming her now or crediting her with his success.
That's actually a really good point because it was before. Man, I think it was 3 games ago. I saw several things about Russell Wilson, the Seahawks have a losing record. They still haven't had a losing record this season, but I saw a post on Facebook, hey, is it really Sierra? Is that really the issue? It's like people really just have to reach for issues at this point. I mean, his girlfriend is not the issue. Really, the issue, I think, was the offensive line, and I think you hit on it earlier in the show, which was the fact that they still had to feel like they had to get Jimmy Graham involved in the game. And nothing against Jimmy Graham. He's a very skilled, excellent player, but it's felt all season long, has it not, that the Seahawks needed to kind of force-feed Jimmy Graham because, hey, we got this guy, we gave up first-rounder, we gave up Max Unger really for this guy, and he has to be a key cog in the offense. And, he was coming on at the end of before he got hurt, but at this point, they're still the Seahawks offense that they were. In fact, they're a little bit better, and they have the same key players. It could just be the chemistry has been built up. But, yeah, I think it's, to me, and you can disagree if you feel like it, but the offensive line obviously has made huge improvements both in the running game and in the passing game. But, and again, you hit on it. I think force-feeding, the fact that I think everybody thought they needed to force-feed Jimmy Graham was a detriment to the offense. Yeah?
Yeah, and, I was, a lot of people, and I was included, it's like, oh, we got Jimmy Graham now. Oh, great, he gets 80 catches a year and this many touchdowns and blah, 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 blah. Well, that was in a Drew Brees-driven offense where they pass more than anything, and that's not what the Seahawks are. And I was expecting them to go to him more, but even when he was playing, they were still targeting him quite a bit, and his production wasn't what it was with the Saints. And really, how can you expect that? I mean, we're, like we've talked about before, we're a run first team. We're not a pass first team. So, and it did appear that he was trying to force feed Jimmy Graham the ball. And, I really, Mike, in the beginning of the season when he was scrambling and getting sacked and looking like nobody was open, I was wondering, are these receivers? I really thought, we don't have fast receivers. We don't have Paul Richardson's gone. I mean, he's out. And he's fast. Maybe if we had him back, he could be out running these defenders. But I really thought the receivers weren't getting open. The last 4 games, that has not been the case. I mean, the receivers are open. He's hitting them. So that tells me that probably in the beginning of the year, the receivers were open. He just wasn't looking for them. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but they're catching the ball now, and Jimmy Graham's not in the game. And like you said, Jimmy Graham's a great player, and I want him on this team. He's a big asset to this team. Back as soon as possible. I don't want him going anywhere. But I think this year it was tough to fit him in. Next year might be a little bit easier because we know what to expect. And, we've had a year with him, well, majority of a year with him, and can fit him in the offense a little differently. But I just don't think he needs to be the main focus of the offense when we're in passing.
Yeah, and I think the other problem with Jimmy Graham is the fact that he's not a good blocker. and that
No.
when he's not been in the game, and it could be that Rawls has more speed than Lynch, obviously, and yada yada yada. But with Graham, it seemed to, I don't know, it was just not again, nothing against Jimmy Graham. It was just not a good fit for whatever reason. But and he'll be a Seahawk, and he should be a Seahawk for the next couple of years unless they decide to trade him. But I don't know. What do you think about the block? Obviously, Lewis has made a big difference. What do you think about the offensive line overall?
They're playing lights out. Did they have any holding calls yesterday?
No, they just had some.
A couple motion penalties, and I mean, they're playing lights out. I mean, no sack? I don't even know if there was a sack, but I mean,
no sacks yesterday.
It's crazy. And granted, Baltimore's got a lot of what they say, 40% of their salary caps on the injured reserve, 19 players, something like that. So you're not playing the best team in the league, but still, they're professional football players, like you said. So, but the offensive line, got to give credit to them, to Tom Cable and Darrell Bevell. I mean, they're playing much better in the last few games. And I don't care what you say about the Minnesota defense, missing 3 of their key players, whatever. That's still a good defense, and we put up some points on them. So, you got to give credit to the offensive line, and they have improved. And I wasn't a believer early on this year that it was going to happen, and they kept telling us, just hang on, we're going to get better, we're going to figure this thing out, and they've made some adjustments. And look at where we are now. So let's hope they can keep it up.
Absolutely. And at this point, we actually are going to be joined by Danny Kelly. Danny is editor at Field Goals, SB Nation's Seahawks site. Danny's been with us before, obviously. Great guest, very knowledgeable. Danny, thanks for being on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get the negative out of the way first. Who is going to run the ball now that Rawls is out for the year and Lynch is still mending? They signed Brown today, but who do you think is going to be the guy who carries the load at this point?
Man, that's a really, really good question. My gut feeling is it's going to come down to Derek Coleman and Bryce Brown, and that's kind of weird because Brown wasn't even on the roster much this year. He's been kind of yo-yoing on and off of it. But I don't think that Dwan Harris is necessarily a, feature back or like a bell cow type back. I think he's kind of like a change of pace style back. But, the Seahawks kind of have some issues with the depth right now, obviously, because they lost Rod Smith to the Cowboys. They lost Kristen Michael, dropped Robert Turbin. So, honestly, my guess would be probably comes down to Coleman and Bryce Brown.
Yeah, you mentioned Michael and Turbin at that point. At this point, it's almost like or with Rawls we were better off. We as Seahawks fans and Seahawks organization were better off, but now it's like I wish I had one of those guys back. At this point, but Russell Wilson had another great game. Obviously, that's 4 in a row. Not that he has been a bad quarterback. He's obviously been a good quarterback, but 4 in a row with playing out of his mind, really almost better than anybody in NFL history over 4 straight games. Is there any difference between Russell now and what he was doing earlier in the year?
Well, I think he certainly looks more comfortable behind the line. That's something that's just noticeable to the naked eye. Like, he's just not as jittery, I guess you could say. Frenetic is another word that people use to describe quarterbacks. If he gets the snap and starts, kind of, he looks a little bit freaked out. Russell Wilson looks really, really calm back there. And I think that goes to kind of the trust he has right now in the protection. They've drawn up some schemes. Pete Carroll said they've adapted their offense a little bit, and I think that means they've changed some things. They've changed some tendencies to get the ball out faster. They're designing stuff that, Russell Wilson gets a snap, hits his back foot after 3 or 5 steps typically, and then he just gets the ball out quickly. And that kind of helps him get into a rhythm. And again, that kind of helps him avoid getting frenetic, which is what he was a lot of the time earlier on in the year. And obviously that had a lot to do with the fact that he was getting pressured like almost immediately on 50% of his snaps, literally. So, yeah, I think the big thing for me is he looks really, really relaxed, really, really zoned in. He's not looking at the pressure. He's looking downfield. He's finding his guys. When they're doing longer developing routes, he's, waiting for that to happen and finding the open guys. They've done over the last 2 weeks, they've had a really good scheme where they run a couple of verticals on the left and then have Doug Baldwin kind of drag over the middle to the right, and that's actually gotten them 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And so that's been a big thing for them. And so basically the bottom line is, I think it's, it starts up front with the protection, but he's just way more comfortable. He's way more calm, and he's just seeing the field really well right now, and the stats obviously back that up.
Hey, Danny, speaking of Baldwin, he's been playing out of his mind the last few weeks, and I guess you could say some of that's been against not some subpar secondaries, not necessarily the best defenses in the league. But do you think he's going to be able to continue that high level of play versus some of the better teams when and if the Seahawks get into the playoffs?
Yeah, I do. I think he's always been a really good a really good receiver. He's just kind of been in a system where there's not a lot of volume to him, and he's made the most of his opportunities in the past. And I think this year he's only dropped 1 pass. We saw that last week. But I think he's always been one of those guys that's really good at getting open. He has a good feel for getting open against zone defenses. He's a smart player. So I think he's just as good. I don't think he's necessarily taken a big jump. I think he's always been a really good player. Maybe he has taken a little bit of a jump and kind of I don't know, I guess taking his game to a little bit different level, but I think he's always been really good. I don't think there's any concern in my mind that that this is kind of a flash in the pan. I don't think he can continue this production forever, obviously, and I think he's one of like 4 or 5 receivers that have ever had 8 touchdowns in 3 games. And the last one to do it was Jerry Rice. So I'm not saying he's going to keep getting 3 touchdowns every game, but just in terms of things he does skill-wise, like get open, run routes, catch the football, I don't think that's going to regress. I think, he's a really, really good player. And with the way that Russell Wilson is throwing the football, he's finally kind of getting the opportunity to put up some gaudy numbers. And so, I think, the future looks good for him.
Yeah, I think so. Now the Seahawks receiving core as a whole, they're not looked at as one of the best cores in the league. But you got Baldwin playing well. You got Kearse. He's had his issues, but he had a good game yesterday. And Tyler Lockett is, he just seems to be improving every game. His returns aren't so much, but his receiving just seems to get better and better. Where would you rank those our wide receiver position group as a whole compared to the rest of the NFL?
Yeah, that's tough to. I mean, against the whole NFL, I probably would put them somewhere in either the second or third. Like if you're dividing the NFL into thirds, I think probably somewhere in the second or third area. But because they don't have a true number one right now in terms of like a big body Des Bryant or AJ Green style receiver. They don't have a guy like that. I think Doug Baldwin is one of the best slot receivers in the NFL, so you got to give him credit there. I think that Tyler Lockett is going to be really, really good, and I'm talking like he's the style of like an Antonio Brown, type of receiver, can get open outside, inside, do everything, punt returns, kick returns. But right now, he's still a rookie, so I would put them somewhere in the second or third. Third of the league, but I think that they're definitely improving from where they were last year. When you put Jimmy Graham in the mix, I think that kind of, that obviously would boost them up a little bit as well. And, I think a lot of the perception on what teams have the best receivers is very, very connected to how well the quarterback is throwing the football. And so if Russell Wilson continues to just flat out, play out of his mind, the Seahawks receivers are going to benefit from that a lot, and the perception of them as talent is going to go up a ton. And you put Paul Richardson into the mix next year potentially, that could be a big factor too. I've kind of looked at him as like a little bit of like a Deshaun Jackson light style guy, like a really, really solid deep threat. So, yeah, I mean, right now I wouldn't say they're anywhere near the top in terms of the